Good morning and welcome to Cheche, the show where opinion counts, live on Citizen TV. I'm your host, Udwaka Mimo. Now, Kenya has the honor of being the first African country to host a World Trade Organization or WTO Ministerial Conference. But even as delegates try to hammer out new trade rules, there's always a question about how sustainable those agreements can be. And so on Cheche today, we will educate ourselves on those rules as well as the efforts to ensure that they're efficient, fair and inclusive. Our guests are the Kenyan ambassador to the United Nations, the WTO and other international organizations, Ambassador Dr. Stephen Dungu Karau, and we also have with us the Managing Director of the International Center for Trade and Sustainable Development, Deborah Voorhees. Welcome. Today's panel is comprised of David Makali and Buweri Mburu, sitting in for Mutegi Njau. Good morning. So, Ambassador, I'll start with you.
All right.
And with an overview and a big picture of the WTO and where we find ourselves.
All right.
Where are we?
Beautiful. Okay, let's begin from the beginning. What's the WTO? The WTO is an international organization. It's an IGO. In other words, it's an intergovernmental organization. Governments are members. It's a membership organization into which various governments ask and request to become members. It's not an easy process. It's called accession. So you come in willingly. But starting from the beginning, the WTO itself...
And this was back in 1995?
Yes, but the history is much longer. As we were forming after the Second World War, we were trying to put the world in an orderly way. So we started, for example, the World Health Organization. We attempted to also form the International Trade Organization. And indeed it was formed, but after a very short time, it collapsed. I think on this very studio, I've heard the words that trade is war. Trade is not easy. I would like to look at it slightly differently and say that trade is competition. The people compete. In economics, you always talk about the competitive advantage. So you are trying to see who can do better. At the end of the day, you want to make an extra buck. So trade is really competition. So this attempt was made to form the International Trade Organization. It failed. So what the countries did, they got together and formed the GATT, a General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. And that's what drove trade for many years, until 1994, thereabouts, that again there was the momentum to start an international trading organization, and eventually WTO was born in this very continent, in Marrakesh, Morocco. And we have the famous agreement that was formed that created WTO. We call it the Marrakesh Agreement. It brought in all the agreements that had been made during the GATT era, and they were now incorporated into the WTO, but still new agreements need to be made. Unfortunately, it has not been easy to agree on new agreements, except one 2 years ago in Bali, when we had this trade facilitation agreement. It was a milestone, and countries are then, all the agreements that are passed in WTO are then supposed to go into national parliaments and become national laws. I'm very happy to report that last week I deposited the protocols for Kenya, because our parliament agreed that this is a good agreement and Kenya should become a part of it. So we have actually ratified. My last activity in Geneva was to hand in the protocols bringing Kenya into the membership of the TFA.
Okay, but where do we find ourselves today as the ministerial conference takes place?
By we, you mean Kenya?
Kenya, the world, WTO.
Yes.
Where are we?
Okay, fine. Again, WTO is organized such that a ministerial conference is the topmost decision-making organ. There are some international organizations for which presidential summits are the final decision-making organs. For the WTO, the Ministerial is the final decision-making organ, and a ministerial meeting is held every 2 years. This one in Nairobi is the 10th ministerial conference since WTO was founded in 1995. So we are calling it the MC10. There's no mystery about it. MC just stands for Ministerial Conference. 10, number 10. The one that will be held in 2 years' time will be MC11. The one we held in Bali 2 years ago was MC9, and so on. So where are we? It's been a long journey to get here. It started as soon as the last conference ended in Bali, and we were supposed to go back to Geneva and implement, or rather come up with a work program that was going to be the agenda for the WTO for the last 2 years. Now, why did we have to develop a new agenda, what is called the Bali, post-Bali work program? WTO works in this way. The ministers will normally, for example, after Nairobi, they are supposed to spell what we should spend time on the next 2 years before we come to the next conference. It's called a work program. The last agreed on work program is what we are calling the famous Doha round. Doha was started in the city of Doha in the year 01.
In Qatar.
In Qatar. A very ambitious program. Ambitious in the sense that for the first time it brought the arena of development, a very important subject, and trade. It brought them together, crafted an agenda for the WTO members to work on, the ambassadors in Geneva, under the supervision of the General Council, work on and come up with agreements in various areas. So it's what has produced the TFA, the Trade Facilitation Agreement. Equally, we were supposed to address issues, very important issues, in agriculture. We are also supposed to address issues in what you call NAMA, non-agricultural market access, and so on and so forth.
And these are some of the sticking points.
These are some of the issues.
But Deborah, let me bring you on, because development and trade, the ambassador talked about it as Doha being the first time we talked about the two together. Why is development, why is this important?
Going forward, I think the world we live in today, we see and have seen ever since Doha, and the members very rightfully adopted, I think, a broader agenda, in the sense that economic growth is very, very important. It drives development for this world, but it has to be seen in a context. We cannot have deepening inequality. We need to be looking at the broader issues of the world, of inclusiveness, bringing the poorest of the poor into the game and helping them to advance. We need to look at the broader issues of the environment. As resources become increasingly scarce, such as water, we have the climate problems among us, and inevitably it is the poor that are the most affected by any of these issues. There are issues of gender and getting equal access for women across all these issues. We see, and we saw yesterday in the session that you so very well moderated, that women drive development at a great pace. There was a great quote yesterday in the panel: when men make money, terribly sorry, I forget who said it, they go to the bar. When women make money, they educate their children, and an entire family advances.
That came from Lisa Karanja of Trademark.
Lisa Karanja of Trademark, and she's really strong on these subjects. However, the bigger picture is we need to see sustainable development in the broader sense. This year, in 2015, we saw the Sustainable Development Goals adopted in New York. It is a special year of coherence, and I think that adds a depth to the conversations that will take place in Nairobi this week, because it adds importance to the
But how does that how is that different from the WTO's objective to ensuring that it raises the standards of living for members, you know, full employment, large and steadily growing volume of real income, and effective demand? Because it just seems as if the WTO already has that within its framework.
The WTO indeed has that already in its framework. What we're working towards now and have been working towards is to make that real and translate that into the implementation of agreements and the crafting of the exact deals that will really give voice to that and not just leave it as words as an objective.
David, you seem skeptical.
I agree, but I'm concerned with the specifics of these talks. I mean, they're pretty generalized categories when you listen to and read reports about them. The fisheries, agricultural agreements and issues. How serious is the disadvantage of the African, Kenyan and developing countries in these talks? Because it looks like it's all hopeless. Maybe we need an estimation.
Can I ask you to park that question for a minute as we come back to Ambassador Karau to get an overview of the sticking points. You started agriculture. I think technology might be one of the sticking points as well. Just give us a sense of where we are on that.
All right. The key agenda, and there has almost been a universal agreement, we must tackle agriculture first before we handle anything else. Because previously there was a lot of attention in general goods and so on. But agriculture being the core business of the majority of the members' populations, there has been a very determined effort to tackle agriculture. Unfortunately, agriculture is not as simple as it sounds, because there are security aspects within agriculture, food security. Everybody wants to be sure that they can have the food. So agriculture is one of the most difficult nuts to crack, and is addressed from three perspectives, what we call the three pillars of agriculture. We have domestic support, which is the one you hear talked about, and a lot of blame being laid about that nobody is doing anything about this. This is not a new subject, and we have known the difficulties. It's almost, it has to be addressed, but agreement on how to address it has not been easy. Then there is the one...
Is this where subsidies for?
Now, the one that, yes, the domestic subsidies, governments subsidizing their farmers so that they can produce. They're not doing that because they want to do it. They want food security, first of all. In the course of doing it, they have surplus. Yeah, they are not doing it deliberately to mess up the world market. It's because in the first place they want to be self-sufficient in food. Yeah. But in the process of subsidizing, they overproduce. And this is where the difficulty comes in. Almost universally, almost every country subsidizes. What we call the subsidies within the green box.
Yes.
And that is allowed. Now, what we have been trying to tackle is the subsidies that distort world trade, that balance.
Yeah.
And now that brings me to the crux of the matter. Why is it a problem? The world, in terms of trade and within WTO, is organized against three classes of countries. You have the least developed. You don't have a choice with regard to that because it's determined by the Economic and Social Council of the UN, and you are classified as least developed. And within Africa, we have the majority of the least developed countries. Out of the 43 members of the WTO from Africa, 34 of them are least developed. Then you have the developing countries. You graduate and you become developing. And this, we have a very wide spectrum. Kenya is a developing country. The second world biggest economy, which is China, is a developing country. India is also a developing country. Now, one of the biggest issues and in the world today, and that is not coming out openly, is the issue of graduation. When do you stop becoming developing and you become developed? Some of the countries would want to define your trade and your development in terms of your trading volume. But then these countries, India and China, come in and say, we can talk of trading volume in terms of, trade per capita. In other words, if you divide my trading volume with the population that I have, and of course they become low because they have big population. But to be fair to them, they also have very, very large populations of poor people. So you still need to address these issues. So the issues that we are talking about and simplifying and saying the West is against us, it's not that simple. Then you have the built-in structures within WTO to help the poorer members come up and trade, you know, in an able way, become better traders within the international arenas. So we have programs within the WTO that are meant to uplift the LDCs. Like just 2 days ago, we had a big pledging conference where a lot of money was pledged.
$90 million.
Yes, to go into helping. So the world is together. What we need to do in Kenya is not just to look at ourselves just as an individual, just as Kenya. We need to look at ourselves in the larger world context as well. So the world is there. It's an open arena, and competition, as I said, trade is competition. We are trying to make the poorer countries trade better and compete better.
Who is we in this context? Because
we is the United World.
The United World.
The United World. We have just defined the SDGs, the development goals, and one of them, actually, under Goal 17, Article 10, is again dealing with trade. So it's a thing that is being looked at from an international perspective. We also need to look at it that way. But having said that, is competition, like I have said from the beginning.
But the Doha round was particularly fractious, wasn't it?
What does that mean?
Contentious. We don't have any sort of, you know, outcome, you know, a tangible outcome from that. Isn't this a background?
2 years.
Yeah.
The Doha round is complex.
Still ongoing.
Yeah, it's been going on. A lot of work has gone into it, and as I said, it's been trying to address agriculture mainly.
Unsuccessfully.
Yeah, unsuccessfully. And the reason for this is, as I said, it's not been an easy subject. Even GATT itself tried to study.
Ambassador, maybe you just need to tell us, with regard to that agriculture, what are we asking the Western countries to do, and what are they refusing to do? In a nutshell, what is it?
In a nutshell, what we are asking them to do is within what I defined as a basic need. Every country wants to secure its food supplies and food security. Now, so the countries have programs to help their farmers, even here in Kenya to some extent. We do. So in that context, over the years, domestic subsidies have also become political, even within their own country, right? Like if you get farmers in France, I think you saw them on TV the other day protesting and putting, it's not an easy subject. So if it's the US, again, subsidies have been there for years. So it has become a political issue in the sense that farmers are used to it. This is the income that we get. It's not something you can just go and say, bang, stop this and move on. But I am not saying the subject should not be addressed.
He's not quite answering the question. I think we'll come into that after the break, but at the moment we already had a question.
I think I like what Deborah has talked about. You know, you bring it down to the common person, that they understand the role of women and in agriculture and what they're producing. But I want to say, Ambassador, you need to break it down. You're a bit technical. You sound a bit technical, but I understand where you're coming from. But again, Africa has been talking about agriculture, and I think one of the issues that with the AU is to push agriculture to the next level. And this is where the role of AU and the ministers that are attending the conference, the delegate ministers who are attending the conference, are supposed to come out very clearly. You cannot avoid the issues of fair trade between developed countries and the very poor countries and developing countries, because countries like countries that are having wars, like Central African Republic, is it in Nairobi, WTO, thinking about the stomach or how safe are they? I think the role, the friendship we are talking about, the relationship between developed countries and the developing countries is what we are discussing about. Even if we are in Nairobi, we were in Morocco, we started in Morocco, we are now in Nairobi. How is Africa benefiting from it?
Okay, I think I don't want to simplify a complex thing.
What
I mean by that is trade in itself sounds easy. It's buying one item and selling it there. Now, if you come into the intricacies of the economics behind all this, and I take trade is competition, some people define it as war. When you look at the rules that govern trade, and as I said, within WTO, there are programs to try and uplift the poorer countries to compete better. So, for example, let me give you a very good example. Domestic subsidies, in my view, should stop. The ones that distort the world the economy, they should stop yesterday. But if tomorrow we say they have stopped, give us food that you said you have, okay? Africa will still need to go through a program of a bit of improving the agriculture, developing the capacity. So it's something that, and we have this ingrained within the WTO. We have the special and differential programs. In Nairobi, one of the things that we are fighting for is a proposal to be approved, what we call the S&D, to help industrialization.
What is the S&D?
Special and differential, supposed to help developing countries advance their industries to be able to have something to offer in the developed world in their markets. So we have to go through that process. In fact, that's what we need to be focusing on.
So this agreement looks after the high tariffs on secondary products, because at the moment Africa exports many primary products and finds it prohibitive to manufacture and export.
Yes.
And this agreement tackles that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So what we need to do, and as I said, and I have emphasized this time and again, this is competition. We need to make ourselves compete better. Even something as simple as pack well, sell well. Produce a beautiful banana, pack it well, and bring it to the world market. Okay? So we need to do that and do it well. We are already doing very well in flowers. Okay? We need to do that in other sectors as well. We also need to industrialize and have products to put on offer, and so on and so forth.
That makes sense. Well, I want to put your question to Deborah, though, because you highlight the relationship between the developed world and developing economies and least developed countries. And it doesn't seem to be a case of honest brokering between the two. The developing world and the LDCs complain about being muscled, manipulated, compelled to coerce to sign agreements that do, against their interests. Is that how you would characterize the relationship?
Not quite.
Not quite?
Okay. But I do think there is a bigger picture to understand here. And I think the ambassador puts it very well. At the end of the day, trade is about competition. And with the best will in the world, you are not going to achieve a perfect agreement that really meets the needs of everybody. So we have to understand that the WTO...
So whose needs are met?
Well, everybody's needs are met only partially. But this is how the WTO works. We have to reach consensus, which means everybody has to give up something. At the end of the day, I have to say the WTO remains important. And it's very, very important because it's the only place where all of these members, the whole group, the developing and the least developed and the developed, can get together. If we don't make the WTO succeed, I think the costs of failure are large. And the costs of failure are large because we see a proliferation of other agreements, the so-called mega-regionals. We see the TPP, we see others. Now, when you see an agreement such as the TPP, which is clearly very valuable,
what is the TPP?
The Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's an agreement between, is it 12 or 13 countries? The thing is that these agreements reap great benefits for participating countries. But it's participating countries. It's 12 or 13. The place where LDCs and low-income countries and the poorer can be represented is at the WTO. This is the place where everybody is. So although the WTO isn't the only place and the only way in which I believe countries should advance their trading capacity, definitely not. I'm a great believer that the African regional integration process is, in my opinion, one of the best opportunities for African countries to move forward. But the WTO remains vital, because it's the place where the poorer countries have to stand their ground and have to work together to advance their agenda. It requires cooperation, collaboration, and determination.
We'll see about that. I have to take a break now, Weweru, before we jump into it. This is Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV. When we come back, Africa's agenda for the WTO. Our SMS number is 22422, or you can tweet us using the hashtag Cheche.